At his son's wedding they gave me a seat in the back. Called me Dad's mistake. I waited until dessert. Then I handed the groom a simple envelope. Nothing flashy but heavy with meaning. It held more than anyone guessed. I remember the exact moment I realized I wasn't just a wife but a mother. David had fallen at the playground, his tiny 2-year-old legs still unsteady on the wood chips. Blood trickled from his knee and his wail pierced the afternoon air. I rushed to him, scooping him up without hesitation. His tears soaked my blouse as I whispered, "It's okay, sweetheart. I've got you." His little arms wrapped around my neck, trusting and innocent. That trust was everything. Sean watched from the bench, phone in hand. Later he thanked me for handling it. As if his son's pain was an errand, a task to be delegated. Looking back, perhaps I should have seen the sign. I'd met Sean at a mutual friend's dinner party 6 months after Charlotte died. He seemed hollowed out by grief, a man struggling to balance work and a toddler. I fell for his quiet determination, his gentle way with David. We married quickly, too quickly perhaps. But the sight of David's wide eyes watching me every morning as I made his breakfast cereal made every doubt vanish. Those early days were a whirlwind of learning. I'd never changed a diaper before, never soothed nightmares or checked for monsters under the bed. I stayed up nights reading parenting books while Sean slept, determined to get it right. When David caught pneumonia that first winter, I took 3 weeks off work, sleeping in a chair beside his hospital bed. Sean visited during lunch breaks, bringing coffee and updating me on work projects. "You're a natural," the nurses would say, assuming I was David's biological mother. I never corrected them. In my heart, the distinction didn't exist. When David turned 4, I used my inheritance from my grandmother to enroll him in the Montessori preschool across town. It cost 3 times what the local daycare charged, but the programs were exceptional. When Sean saw the tuition statement, he raised his eyebrows but said nothing. That became our pattern. I would pay, he would nod. "You don't mind covering this?" he asked once when the pediatric dentist recommended early orthodontic work that our insurance wouldn't fully cover. "Of course not," I replied. "He's our son." Sean looked away. "That's very generous of you." I didn't see it as generosity. When you love someone, you don't itemize receipts. You give what you can because their happiness completes your own. The college fund I started, the summer camps, the swim lessons, the private tutor when David struggled with reading. These weren't financial transactions but expressions of love. David's 5th birthday was when I first noticed the shift. Sean took him shopping for presents without inviting me along. When they returned, David clutched a photo album. "Daddy showed me pictures of my real mommy," he announced, eyes bright. "She was beautiful." My heart twisted but I smiled. She absolutely was, sweetheart. That night I asked Sean why he hadn't included me. "He needs to know about Charlotte," he said simply. "I don't want him forgetting where he came from." "I would never want him to forget," I replied. "But I'm here too." Sean's eyes cooled. In a different way. The word real became a splinter in our home, small but perpetually painful. "My real mom liked strawberry ice cream too," David would say. Or, "Did my real mom know how to French braid like you do?" Each time I'd swallow the hurt and respond with stories about Charlotte that Sean had shared with me. I refused to make David feel guilty for his curiosity. When David was 7, he made a Mother's Day card at school. I found it tucked deep in the trash. "Happy Mother's Day," crossed out and replaced with, "To Eleanor," in Sean's handwriting. I cried in the laundry room that evening, the washing machine's hum masking my sobs. Yet there were beautiful moments too. The night David crawled into my bed during a thunderstorm, seeking comfort from me instead of his father. The proud smile he flashed when I cheered louder than anyone at his first soccer goal. The time he fell asleep against my shoulder during a long car ride, completely trusting. "Why doesn't David call you Mom?" my sister asked during a rare visit. We were watching him play in the yard, Sean at work. "It needs to be his choice," I replied. "I don't want to pressure him." "But you are his mom," she insisted. "In every way that counts." Perhaps that was my mistake, believing that love speaks for itself, that actions translate clearly without words to frame them, that Sean would honor my role even if he didn't acknowledge it publicly. By David's 10th birthday, Sean had grown distant not just from me but from home itself. Business trips lengthened. Weekend golf games multiplied. I became both parents by default, attending every parent-teacher conference alone, solving every childhood crisis solo. What I couldn't see, wouldn't see, was what happened during those rare father-son outings. How Sean would casually mention that I wasn't blood family. How he would show pictures of Charlotte saying, "Your mother would be so proud," with pointed emphasis. How he would correct David if he slipped and called me anything close to mom. "Eleanor is very kind to help out with you," he would say, as if I were an au pair rather than the woman who held our family together. The damage accumulated gradually like rainwater eroding stone. David grew more formal around me, the easy affection of early childhood hardening into polite distance. By 12 he knocked before entering rooms I occupied. By 13 he stopped seeking my advice on friends, school, his changing body. I convinced myself it was normal adolescence, that all teenagers pull away before returning. I told myself that the foundation we'd built would eventually reassert itself. I believed that truth, my daily, hourly love, would ultimately speak louder than whatever narrative Sean was constructing. I was wrong. The seeds Sean planted grew roots, twisted and binding. What I didn't understand then was that love isn't always enough. Sometimes it needs advocates, defenders, witnesses. Sometimes silence isn't graceful acceptance but slow surrender. And so the years passed with me pouring love into a vessel that leaked, never knowing that someone else was drilling the holes. The shift happened so gradually I almost couldn't pinpoint when the child who once sought my comfort became the teenager who barely met my eyes across the dinner table. David turned 14 on a crisp autumn day. I'd spent weeks planning a surprise party, coordinating with his friends' parents, decorating the basement with gaming themes he loved. When the moment came and everyone shouted, "Surprise!" his smile was genuine, until he saw me standing there holding his favorite chocolate cake with 14 carefully placed candles. "Thanks," he said flatly before turning to high-five his friends. No hug. Not even the quick, embarrassed one I'd grown accustomed to receiving in public. Later that evening, after his friends had gone home, I handed him a small box containing the vintage watch I'd tracked down, identical to one his grandfather had owned, according to Sean's stories. "This is nice," David said, barely glancing at it before setting it aside. He saved his real enthusiasm for Sean's gift. A gaming system Sean had contributed nothing toward researching but had allowed me to purchase and wrap with his name alongside mine. "Dad, this is exactly what I wanted," he exclaimed, giving Sean the warm embrace I'd been denied. I retreated to the kitchen, busying myself with cleaning up wrapping paper, pretending the slight hadn't cut deep. That year marked the beginning of many silent birthdays. My cards received courteous acknowledgments. My gifts earned perfunctory thanks. The distance expanded into everyday life. Conversations dwindled to logistics. Dinner times, school schedules, weekend plans. One evening when David was 15, I noticed him struggling with geometry homework. Math had always been our thing. Long nights at the kitchen table working through problems together since elementary school. "Need any help?" I offered. He stiffened. "No thanks. Dad's going to help me later." Sean, who hadn't balanced his own checkbook in years, glanced up from his phone. "That's right, buddy. We'll tackle it together." They never did. I found the assignment crumpled in David's trash the next day, half finished with a failing grade scrawled across the top. When report cards came, I tried to discuss the geometry grade with David. "You used to love math," I said gently. "What changed?" Before David could respond, Sean interjected from across the room. "Leave him be, Eleanor. He's not yours to fix." The words hung in the air like smoke. David looked between us, confusion settling into something harder when Sean added, "You try too hard sometimes. He's my son." After that, Sean's comments became more frequent, more pointed. When I suggested David needed a curfew, "He doesn't need your rules." When I scheduled a dentist appointment, "I'll handle my son's healthcare decisions." When I asked about college applications, "This is between David and me." Each statement carved away at my place in our family until I found myself hesitating before entering rooms they occupied together, like an intruder in my own home. I started eating dinner later after they'd finished. I stopped asking about school events. I learned to exist on the periphery of their shared life. The college acceptance letter arrived during David's senior year. Harvard, his dream school. I'd spent countless nights reviewing essays without him knowing, sending subtle suggestions through Sean. The kitchen erupted in celebration when the thick envelope appeared. "We did it, Dad!" David shouted, embracing Sean. Friends and extended family gathered that weekend for an impromptu celebration. I prepared all David's favorite foods, decorated with crimson and white. During toasts, David stood, glass raised. "I want to thank my father," he said, voice thick with emotion. "You've been my rock, my guide. Everything I am I owe to you." Sean basked in the praise, accepting congratulations as if he'd single-handedly raised a Harvard man. No one seemed to notice that I'd slipped away to the kitchen, hands trembling as I sliced more cake. No one knew I'd already signed papers selling my mother's lakefront property, land that had been in our family for generations, to ensure David could attend without financial burden. 3 months later, I drove alone to a real estate closing, handing over deeds to land that had cradled my childhood summers. The agent asked why I was selling. "My son's education," I replied simply. It was the first time I'd said those words aloud in years. My son. That fall, I helped David pack for college while Sean was at work. As I folded sweaters and organized toiletries, David took a business call in his bedroom. His door was ajar and his voice carried down the hallway. "No, just my dad dropping me off," he was saying to someone. "My stepmom? No, she's not really in the picture. Just lives with us." I froze, a shirt half folded in my hands. Not in the picture. After 16 years of bedtime stories, doctor's visits, homework help and unwavering support, I'd been reduced to a household fixture, like a lamp or side table. The bathroom became my sanctuary that afternoon. I locked the door, turned on the shower to mask any sound and sank to the floor. The tears came silently. I'd long since learned to cry without making noise. The shame of my pain felt almost worse than the pain itself. Why did it still hurt? Why couldn't I accept what was clearly reality? Yet beneath the hurt smoldered something fiercer. A mother's love, stubborn and unyielding. The next day I called Harvard's financial aid office privately, arranging payment schedules. I set up automatic transfers for David's rent, meal plan and expenses. I researched textbook costs, winter clothing needs for Massachusetts weather, health insurance details. When Sean drove David to college, I stayed behind, uninvited to the milestone moment. But the following week I mailed a care package with homemade cookies, vitamins, a subway map and $500 in cash. The note simply read, "Proud of you, Eleanor." No acknowledgement came. Still, every month I sent money. Every holiday, care packages. Throughout that freshman year, I monitored his bank account that I'd set up years earlier, ensuring it never dipped too low. When flu season hit Cambridge, I arranged for soup delivery to his dorm room. When winter break approached, I quietly paid for his flight home. Sean took full credit for David's success at parent weekends in phone calls and social media posts. I remained invisible, a ghost mother present only in the invisible safety net I maintained. "He'll understand someday," my sister insisted during one of our rare calls. "Kids figure it out eventually." I clung to that hope like a life raft. Someday the fog of Sean's manipulation would clear. Someday the years of steady love would count for something. Someday the truth would matter more than the narrative. That hope sustained me through 4 years of college, through the pain of exclusion, through the quiet indignity of erasure. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep me going. One day at a time, one care package at a time, one silent act of love at a time. The day the wedding announcement came, I was tending to my small garden. Spring blossoms had just begun to appear, tiny bursts of color against the dark soil. The mailman waved from his truck as I knelt among the daffodils. Inside the pile of bills and advertisements lay a cream-colored envelope with elegant script. My hands trembled slightly as I read the announcement. David, now 26 and working at a prestigious law firm, was marrying Kelly Robinson. I'd never met her, though I'd seen photos on social media. A bright-eyed woman with a warm smile. They looked happy together. Despite everything, joy swelled in my chest. My boy, always my boy in my heart, was building a life. For a moment I allowed myself to daydream. Perhaps this would be our chance to reconnect. Weddings were new beginnings, not just for couples but sometimes for families too. I imagined helping Kelly pick flowers or address invitations, the comfortable companionship of women planning a celebration. I pictured myself beside David, watching him try on tuxedos, offering motherly advice he might finally be ready to hear. The formal invitation arrived 3 weeks later. I tore open the envelope eagerly, my heart light with possibility. The card was beautiful, letterpress printing on heavy stock, a watercolor border of blue hydrangeas. I ran my fingers over the raised text, savoring the moment before reading the names. Mr. and Mrs. Robinson request the honor of your presence at the marriage of their daughter, Kelly Ann, to David Michael Porter, son of Mr. Sean Porter and Ms. Eleanor Wilkins. Not Mrs. Porter. Not David's mother. Just Eleanor Wilkins, as if I were a distant relation or family friend. My name sat alone, disconnected from the family unit. No handwritten note accompanied the formal text. No, can't wait to see you, or, hope you can make it. Just printed words, the same ones sent to distant cousins and work colleagues. I set the invitation on the kitchen counter and stared out the window. 24 years of my life dedicated to that boy, and I'd been reduced to an afterthought, a name to be accommodated rather than celebrated. The phone rang that evening, Sean, his voice overly casual. Got the invitation? He asked. Yes, it's lovely, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. Good. Listen, David and I are meeting with the venue coordinator tomorrow. They need a deposit check. Of course. The financial expectation remained unchanged, even as my role diminished. How much? I asked, already reaching for my checkbook. The amount he named made me wince. Nearly a third of what remained from my aunt's inheritance. But I wrote the check without comment and left it in Sean's home office. 2 days later, a text from Sean. Caterer needs deposit too. Sending details. No invitation to join the tasting. No request for input on the menu. Just the expectation of payment. In the months that followed, I became a silent investor in a production where I had no creative input. Florist bills appeared on my desk with post-it notes in Sean's handwriting. David's wedding. Photographer deposits, band bookings, transportation arrangements. All presented as fait accompli, with only the financial obligation left for me to fulfill. I drained my savings account. I liquidated stocks my father had given me decades ago. I never complained, never questioned. Each check I wrote felt like a final act of motherhood. One last gift to the child who didn't see me. Kelly called once, her voice hesitant. Eleanor? It's Kelly. David's fiancée. Hello, dear, I said warmly, heart leaping at this small connection. How are the wedding plans coming? Great, she said. David's dad has been so helpful. I just wanted to check if you're coming to the rehearsal dinner? Sean mentioned you might not be able to make it. My breath caught. This was the first I'd heard of being excluded from the rehearsal. I hadn't heard about any scheduling conflict, I managed. Oh. Well, it's at the country club on Friday at 7. Sean said something about you having a prior commitment. The lie stung sharper than the exclusion itself. I had no prior commitment. How could I? This wedding had become my sole focus. I'll be there, I said firmly. Silence on the line then. Great. I'll tell Sean to add you to the count. Add me to the count. As if I were an unexpected +1 rather than the woman who had raised the groom. The rehearsal dinner proved to be just the preview of what waited at the wedding. I sat at a table with distant relatives who asked repeatedly how I knew the family. Sean gave a heartfelt speech about watching his son grow into a man, carefully constructing a narrative that excluded me entirely. David thanked his father profusely, his new in-laws warmly, and offered me a cursory nod from across the room. The wedding day dawned bright and clear. I dressed carefully in a sage green suit I'd purchased months earlier, when hope still colored my expectations. I drove myself to the vineyard where the ceremony would take place, arriving early to help if needed. The wedding planner, another expense I'd covered, looked confused when I offered assistance. Oh, we have everything handled, she said. The mother of the groom is helping Kelly get ready and Sean is with David. The mother of the groom. Kelly's mother had assumed the role that should have been mine. I wandered the grounds alone until guests began arriving. The ceremony space was beautiful. White chairs on a lawn overlooking rolling vineyards, an arch of blue and white flowers where the couple would exchange vows. I found my program on a seat in the back row, far from where family would sit. As I settled into my assigned place, I overheard 2 women behind me. Which one is she? One whispered. Back row, green suit. Dad's first mistake, the other replied with a chuckle. The real mom died years ago. Dad's first mistake. The words carved into me like a physical blow. Is that how I'd been described to others? As Sean's error in judgment, A regrettable detour in the family story? I sat frozen as the ceremony began, as David and Sean walked down the aisle together, as vows were exchanged and rings presented. I smiled mechanically in all the right places, applauded when others did, stood when directed. Inside, something was hardening, not my heart, which remained full of love for David, but my resolve. At the reception, my isolation became physically manifest. The seating chart placed me at table 19 in the farthest corner of the tent, with colleagues from David's firm who looked surprised when I introduced myself as his stepmother. From my peripheral position, I watched the family table laugh and toast, a tight circle of belonging from which I'd been deliberately excluded. I considered leaving. The humiliation burned like acid, eating away at my composed exterior. What was the point of enduring more of this calculated erasure? But as the servers began clearing dinner plates, preparing for the cake cutting and dessert, a strange calm settled over me. I reached into my handbag and felt the edge of the envelope I'd placed there that morning. Simple white stationery, unsealed, containing papers I'd compiled over months. Stay until dessert, I told myself. Just stay until dessert. The truth had waited 24 years. It could wait another hour. The wedding cake gleamed under the reception lights. 5 tiers of white fondant accented with sugar flowers that matched Kelly's bouquet. David and Kelly stood behind it, champagne glasses in hand, radiant with joy as the photographer directed them through the ritual. The silver cake knife caught the light as they made the first ceremonial cut together. Their hands overlapped in a picture-perfect moment. Applause rippled through the tent. I joined in mechanically, my hands moving without conscious direction. My mind had detached from the spectacle, floating somewhere above the celebration, watching myself watch them. The DJ's voice boomed across the space. And now, ladies and gentlemen, the father-son dance. Sean stepped forward, straightening his tie with practiced confidence. David's face lit up as they met in the center of the dance floor. The music swelled, some classic rock ballad that Sean had always loved. They moved awkwardly but earnestly across the polished floor, Sean's hand clapping his son's shoulder in that masculine display of affection that had always existed between them. "Ladies and gentlemen," David called out as the song ended, his voice thick with emotion, "a toast to my father, my greatest role model and best friend." Glasses raised throughout the room. Sean basked in the adoration, his arms slung casually around David's shoulders. Neither of them glanced toward table 19. The moment crystallized 24 years of invisibility. I could have been any stranger, any distant acquaintance witnessing this celebration. No one would have known I'd been the one to teach David to tie his shoelaces, to help him through his first heartbreak, to drive him to SAT prep classes every Saturday for 6 months. As the servers circulated with cake slices, I knew my moment had arrived. My fingers found the envelope in my purse. A simple white rectangle containing 2 decades of bank statements, canceled checks and transfer receipts. I'd compiled them methodically over 3 months, retrieving records from safety deposit boxes and old filing cabinets. The evidence of a mother's devotion, documented in cold financial terms. I stood, smoothing my skirt with suddenly steady hands. A strange calm had settled over me, the tranquility that comes with absolute certainty. I was done being erased. Done with the polite fiction that had defined our family. Done pretending that truth didn't matter. The path to the head table felt endless. Guests turned to watch my approach, conversations faltering as I passed. I felt rather than saw Sean's attention shift, his smile freezing as he registered my movement. David was laughing at something Kelly's father had said when I reached him. His eyes widened slightly when he noticed me standing there, surprise not warmth. "Eleanor," he said, using my first name as he always did. "Is everything okay?" I didn't speak. Words had failed me for 24 years. They wouldn't serve me now. Instead, I simply extended the envelope, holding it between us like an offering. David hesitated before taking it, confusion evident in the furrow of his brow. "What's this?" I merely shook my head and stepped back. I'd delivered my message. The rest wasn't up to me. Sean moved forward, irritation flashing across his features. "Eleanor, this isn't the time for..." I turned and walked away before he could finish, my back straight, my steps measured. Behind me I heard Kelly ask, "What is it?" and David's murmured, "I don't know." I returned to my table but remained standing, watching from a distance as David opened the envelope. He pulled out the first sheet of paper. A bank statement from Harvard's bursar office, showing tuition payment from my personal account. Then another, the canceled check for his first apartment's security deposit. And another, the wire transfer for this very wedding venue. His expression changed gradually as he flipped through the pages. The confident smile faded. Confusion gave way to disbelief, then to something darker. A dawning comprehension that made his hands tremble visibly even from where I stood. Kelly leaned over his shoulder, her white dress brushing against his sleeve as she read alongside him. Her hand went to her mouth, eyes widening. Sean stepped closer, attempting to see the documents, but David angled his body away, an instinctive movement that spoke volumes. The reception continued around them, music playing, guests dancing, servers circulating with champagne refills. But at the head table, time seemed suspended in a bubble of revelation. David looked up, scanning the room. His eyes passed over me once, then returned, locking with mine across the distance. For the first time in years, he truly saw me, not as his father's wife, not as a peripheral figure, but as a person with agency and history and unacknowledged sacrifice. Kelly touched his arm, leaning close to whisper something in his ear. He nodded slowly, still holding my gaze. Then Kelly straightened, her expression resolute as she surveyed the crowded tent. Her voice carried clearly through the ambient noise when she spoke to him. "Go get your mother." The word hung in the air like a spell. Mother. Not Eleanor. Not stepmom. Mother. David stood, the papers clutched in his hand. Sean reached for his arm, saying something urgent that I couldn't hear, but David shook him off with uncharacteristic firmness. Guests noticed the tension, conversations faltering as attention shifted toward the head table. The DJ, oblivious to the unfolding drama, continued playing upbeat dance music that now seemed jarringly inappropriate. I remained still as David made his way toward me, weaving between tables with purpose. His face had lost its celebratory glow, replaced by an intensity one hadn't seen since he was a determined child trying to master bicycle riding or complex math problems. 10 feet away. Then he stood before me, the documents still gripped tightly in his left hand. The wedding ring on his right hand caught the light, the ring I'd helped pay for without acknowledgement. "Is this true?" he asked, his voice barely audible above the music. "All of it." I nodded once. "Every penny." "The college tuition? My apartment? This wedding?" "Yes. Dad said he paid for everything. He told me." His voice trailed off, unwilling or unable to complete the thought. "I know what he told you," I replied simply. David looked down at the papers again, then back at me. Something shifted in his eyes. A recalibration of 24 years of carefully constructed narrative. "Why didn't you ever say anything?" he asked. The question contained multitudes. Why hadn't I corrected Sean's lies? Why hadn't I demanded recognition? Why had I allowed myself to be erased from our family story? "Would you have believed me?" I answered softly. The truth of that question landed like a physical blow. He wouldn't have. Sean's version of our family had been the only one David had ever fully accepted. Till now. The music faded as the DJ announced the bouquet toss would be next. Neither of us moved. The moment stretched between us, heavy with unspoken questions and 2 decades of misdirection. Then David did something he hadn't done since he was 12 years old. He reached for my hand. David's hand in mine felt foreign yet achingly familiar, like a melody once known by heart and long forgotten. His fingers were larger now, a man's hand instead of the boy's hand I remembered, but the gentle pressure was the same. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice low. "Somewhere quieter." I nodded, unable to trust my voice. Around us, the reception swirled on. The photographer directing poses, the DJ announcing the bouquet toss, guests laughing over champagne. None of it seemed real anymore. David led me through the side exit of the tent, past curious onlookers and away from the golden light of the celebration. The spring evening air felt cool against my flushed skin. We walked in silence until we reached a stone bench overlooking the vineyard's sloping hills, far enough from the music that we could hear the chirp of evening crickets. I sat down, smoothing my dress beneath me. David remained standing, the envelope still clutched in his hand, shifting his weight from one foot to another like he used to do before piano recitals as a child. "I need to understand," he finally said. "All these years, everything was you?" I looked out at the darkening vineyard, gathering my thoughts. Not everything. But the financial support, yes. The college tuition, your first apartment, the summer internship housing, this wedding. Why would he lie? David interrupted, his voice cracking slightly. Why would Dad tell me he was the one supporting me? The question hung between us, sharp-edged and dangerous. For 24 years I'd protected Sean's ego, preserved his image in David's eyes. The truth felt like betrayal even now. Your father, I began, then stopped myself. Sean loves you, David. In his way. That doesn't answer my question. I sighed. Some men need to be heroes to their children. Sean couldn't be the financial provider he wanted to be. Maybe it was easier for him to take credit than admit he couldn't give you what you needed. David ran a hand through his carefully styled hair, musing it in frustration. But to erase you completely? To act like you weren't even part of my life. He paced in front of the bench, energy radiating from him in waves. I remember him saying you were just someone who lived with us, that you weren't really family. I believed him. The admission stung, but I had long suspected as much. Children trust their parents, I said simply. Why wouldn't you believe him? Because you were there. His voice rose, emotion breaking through. You were there every day, driving me to school, helping with homework, making dinner. You were there when I had chicken pox and couldn't sleep. You were there at every band concert, every baseball game. He stopped suddenly, the realization dawning across his features. You were there and I didn't see you. His eyes met mine, shining with unshed tears. Then he did something that stole my breath. He knelt in front of me on the garden path, taking both my hands in his. Mom, he said, the word emerging like a prayer, fragile and reverent. I didn't know. 24 years of waiting for that word. 24 years of answering to Eleanor or hey, or nothing at all. The dam inside me broke, tears spilling down my cheeks unchecked. I made no effort to hide them or wipe them away. It's okay, I whispered, but David shook his head vehemently. It's not okay. None of this is okay. His own tears fell now, tracking down his face and dampening his color. I'm so sorry. For everything I never said. For everything I never thanked you for. For every time I chose not to see what was right in front of me. I leaned forward and wrapped my arms around him, pulling him against my shoulder as I had when he was small. He didn't resist, his body shaking with quiet sobs that matched my own. I'm sorry, he repeated against my shoulder. I'm so sorry. Time lost meaning as we sat there, grief and reconciliation flowing between us like a current. When he finally pulled back, his face was transformed, younger somehow, unburdened of something heavy. Every baseball game, he said softly. Every science fair. Every time I was sick. You were always there, and he convinced me that didn't matter. David. No, he interrupted, his voice firmer now. I need to say this. I believed him when he said you weren't really my mother. I let him rewrite my own memories. I accepted his version over what I actually lived. A twig snapped nearby, and we both turned to see Kelly standing a few yards away, her white dress ghostly in the gathering dusk. She approached hesitantly. I didn't want to interrupt, she said, but I was worried. David stood, reaching for her hand. Kelly, I need to tell you something about my family. About who really raised me. She glanced between us, her expression gentle. I think I'm starting to understand. To my surprise, she knelt beside me on the bench and wrapped her arms around me in a firm hug. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I had no idea. Sean always talked as if you were just his wife, not David's mother. Her validation soothed something raw inside me. To be seen. To be acknowledged. The simplicity of that recognition felt like water after years of drought. I want you at our table, Kelly said, pulling back to look me in the eyes. Not in the back corner. You should be beside us where family belongs. David nodded vigorously. Yes. Right now. We'll have them rearrange. But why? I interrupted, the question burning inside me since I'd first opened that envelope of wedding receipts. Why would your father work so hard to erase me? What did I do to deserve that? David's expression darkened. He exchanged a glance with Kelly, who squeezed his hand in silent support. I think I know, he said slowly. And it has nothing to do with anything you did wrong. What then? David sat beside me, choosing his words carefully. All these years, Dad talked about how much he sacrificed for me after Charlotte died. How he gave up everything to raise me alone. He wasn't alone, I said. I was there from the time you were 2. Exactly. But his whole identity became wrapped up in being the heroic single father. If he acknowledged your role, he'd have to share that identity. He'd have to share me. David's voice caught. And maybe face the truth that you were a better parent than he ever was. The realization settled over me with perfect, painful clarity. I wasn't erased because I failed as a mother. I was erased because I succeeded, and that success threatened Sean's carefully constructed narrative. You were never his partner, David continued, insight flashing in his eyes. You were his convenience. Someone to handle the daily work of parenting while he claimed the credit. I winced at hearing my own thoughts spoken aloud. He's still your father, David. Yes, he acknowledged, but not the father I thought he was. Not the hero I've spent my life trying to impress. His shoulders slumped slightly. Do you know how many decisions I've made just to make him proud? Law school. Firm. Even parts of this wedding. Kelly placed a hand on his arm. People are starting to notice we're all missing. David straightened, resolve replacing hurt on his features. Let them notice. It's time for the truth to come out. He stood, offering me his hand. Will you come back in with us? As my mother, not as a guest. The invitation was everything I'd longed for, yet I hesitated. Sean won't take this well. I don't care, David said firmly. This is my wedding day and I want my mother beside me. Mother. The word still sent a tremor through me. As we walked back toward the reception, Kelly on one side and David on the other, I felt a weight lifting, years of invisibility falling away with each step. Behind us, the vineyard stretched dark and vast. Ahead, the warm light of truth and recognition. For the first time in decades, I walked not as a shadow but as myself. Eleanor Wilkins, David's mother. The reception tent glowed golden against the darkening sky as we approached, arms linked like a united front. Conversations faltered and heads turned as we entered. The music continued playing, Frank Sinatra's The Way You Look Tonight. But attention had shifted from the dance floor to our unlikely trio. Sean spotted us first. His champagne glass paused halfway to his lips, eyes narrowing as he registered the changed dynamic between us. He set his glass down with deliberate calm and started toward us, his practiced smile not quite reaching his eyes. There you are, he said, addressing David while pointedly ignoring me. Everyone's been wondering where you disappeared to. The photographer wants some more family shots. Perfect timing, David interrupted, his voice clear and firm. We need photos with my mother. The word hung in the air between them. Sean's smile froze, then faltered. David, he began, lowering his voice, this really isn't the time for the truth. David finished. I disagree. This is exactly the time. He placed his hand over mine where it rested on his arm. I've just learned who really paid for my education. My apartment. This wedding. His voice remained even, but carried an undercurrent of steel I'd never heard before. Why would you lie to me about that? Sean's face flushed. We can discuss this later. In private. No, David said simply. I'm done with private half-truths. Eleanor. He caught himself, squeezing my hand. My mother deserves better. She deserves recognition for everything she's done. Kelly stepped forward, her expression composed despite the tension. I've asked the staff to move Eleanor's place setting to our table. Her voice held no room for negotiation. Where she belongs. Sean's jaw tightened. For a moment, I glimpsed the man beneath the charm, the one who had systematically erased me from his son's life. He glanced around at the nearby guests, pretending not to eavesdrop, then back at David. Son, you're emotional. We can sort this out tomorrow. I'm not emotional, Dad. I'm seeing clearly for the first time. David straightened his shoulders. The photographer can wait. I have something to say first. Before Sean could object, David guided me toward the center of the tent. Kelly nodded to the DJ, who lowered the music. Conversation died away as David raised his glass, the crystal catching light as he sought the attention of the room. If I could have everyone's attention, please, he called. The remaining chatter faded to silence. All eyes turned toward us. David tall and resolute in his tuxedo, me still in my sage green suit from the back row, Kelly radiant in white. David took a deep breath. Many of you have known me my whole life. You've watched me grow up. Graduate. Start my career. Today marry the love of my life. His voice was steady, carrying to the farthest tables. But I realize now that you've only known half my story. The half my father wanted you to see. A ripple moved through the crowd. Sean remained frozen at the edge of the gathering, face unreadable. I'd like to propose a toast, David continued, to the woman who gave me more than I ever knew, and never asked for anything in return. He turned to me, eyes shining with emotion. My mother, Eleanor Wilkins, who raised me, supported me, and loved me unconditionally, even when I failed to recognize that love. Murmurs spread across the room. Guests exchanged glances, recalibrating years of assumptions. I stood straight, chin lifted, neither denying nor affirming the whispers. The truth spoke for itself now. To my mother, David concluded, raising his glass higher. To Eleanor, Kelly echoed, raising her own glass. Glasses lifted throughout the tent, the gesture spreading like ripples on water. To Eleanor, voices repeated, some confused, some curious, all watching this unexpected drama unfold. I didn't search for Sean's reaction. It no longer mattered. Instead, I looked at David, really looked at him, and saw the little boy who once climbed into my lap for bedtime stories, now grown into a man brave enough to face uncomfortable truths. My smile came not from vindication but from peace, the quiet contentment of finally being seen after decades of invisibility. I hadn't been Dad's first mistake. I had been a mother. A real one. The toast complete, David leaned down to whisper, "I'm sorry it took me this long." "You found your way," I replied simply. The reception continued, transforming around us. Staff brought a chair to the head table, placing it between David and Kelly's parents. The photographer captured new combinations of family portraits, David with both his father and me, though Sean maintained rigid distance throughout. Guests approached tentatively at first, then with growing warmth, introducing themselves or reintroducing themselves, seeing me with new eyes. David always had the best Halloween costumes, one college friend told me. He said his moth. He caught himself. He said you stayed up all night making them. The dinosaur was my favorite, I replied with a smile. Green felt scales for days. You made that, he laughed. Legendary. We all wanted one. Such moments accumulated throughout the evening. Small recognitions, connections restored, history rewritten with truth rather than convenience. Not all reactions were positive. Sean's sister avoided me entirely. His college roommate muttered something about stirring up drama as he passed. But for each cold shoulder, there came a warm handshake, a genuine question, an acknowledgement of my place in David's life. The wedding ended near midnight. As guests departed with sparklers and well wishes, David embraced me one last time before leaving for the honeymoon suite. We'll talk more when Kelly and I get back from Bali, he promised. There's so much I want to know. So many years to catch up on. I'll be here, I assured him. I've always been here. Life after that night wasn't perfect. True healing never follows a smooth path. The first few family gatherings were awkward, Sean and I maintaining careful distance, sharing a son but little else. David sometimes overcompensated, including me in every decision, every celebration, as if making up for lost time. But gradually a new normal emerged. David called regularly, not out of obligation but genuine desire to connect. He and Kelly visited for Sunday dinners, then later brought their daughter, my granddaughter, Emma Charlotte, named for both her grandmothers. When Emma was baptized, David asked me to stand as her godmother. You taught me what unconditional love looks like, he explained. That's what I want for her. The following May brought my first official Mother's Day. The doorbell rang early, revealing a delivery man struggling with an enormous bouquet of wildflowers. Not formal roses or lilies, but meadow blooms in riotous colors, the kind I'd always preferred. The card read simply, "You raised me twice, once with love, once with truth. I needed both. Love your son." I placed the flowers in the center of my dining table and sat looking at them for a long while, their beauty unruly and perfect. Like motherhood itself. Like truth. Sean and I eventually reached a détente of sorts. He never apologized explicitly, but acknowledgement came in subtle forms. Introducing me as David's mother at Emma's first birthday party, consulting me about holiday gifts, yielding space without complaint. The past couldn't be undone. The years of erasure couldn't be reclaimed. but they could be recognized, honored in their pain and their lesson. I never wanted revenge, just truth. And that night, in front of everyone, the truth had come home to roost, quiet, powerful, and finally irrevocably mine. When people ask me now if I regret those silent years, I think of David's face as he knelt before me on that garden path. I think of Emma's tiny fingers clutching mine. I think of the Mother's Day cards that now arrive without fail. No, I always answer. Truth finds its moment. Love finds its way home. And sometimes that journey begins with a simple envelope handed over at just the right time. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button. My favorite moment was when David finally called Eleanor Mom. What was yours? Share in the comments. Subscribe for more stories that'll make you feel something.